Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV and Basketball, alongside my co-host, Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy? Everything good in terms of the recording and everything? We're good.
Yeah, man, it seems like we're solid this go around. Obviously, fingers crossed, we were in full-blown NBA trade deadline extravaganza mode, to the point that I think even Riverside could not hold up with all the insane trades that took place at the trade deadline. Look, we covered as many as we could. TV on the back end, of course, gave his analysis on some of the other things that took place on the back end of the trade deadline, as far as some of the smaller, needle moving moves that took place. So definitely check out that episode for sure. But so far, so good, TV. Obviously, only a couple seconds in, only about a minute or so into the recording, so fingers crossed. But look, today we have what's a jam-packed episode, but one that should be a little bit more tame than last episode. Hopefully, Riverside has a chance to, regain its bearings and kind of, still let us get these trade conversations off. But stick with us for the next hour 15.
100%, man. And yeah, we, like Jay mentioned, action-packed episode. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the trade deadline moves, kind of giving some awards, the most underrated move, the best non-move, some of the moves that didn't happen, we actually going to have a chance to talk about today. So we're going to give some awards to certain teams, certain trades and all that, which should be fun. But that's going to transition us nicely, Jay, because we're finally going to talk about, as everything is settled, we're basically have the confirmed roster of each team. Let's talk about who's in the championship bubble. Let's talk about who truly are the contenders in this league. And Jay and I are going to go through some of the top teams and say, you know what, maybe this team deserves to be in it. Maybe this team, we have to see a little bit more before we can, put them in the bubble. And we're going to try and figure out who we think are the true contenders as of this point right now, as of February 10th, before the All-Star break. So, should be a fun episode. And last but not least, Jay, before we go into the plugging of the socials, Jay's going to be paying off his January his January daily picks challenge, where he gets to do a little bit of a Valentine's Day themed punishment for today. So it should be a very fun one there to at the end. So be sure to stick around for that. But like I said, Jay, before we get into that, we do have to plug our socials. Make sure you follow our individual socials at TV on Basketball, at The Routine Jumper. Those links can be found in the description down below. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. You got the picks, news, series, clips, all that good stuff. We appreciate all of you guys for showing us support over there. In terms of the YouTube, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. The subscribers keep coming. We had 8 or 10 in the last week ever since we hit the 100 subscriber mark. So guys, continue to show your support. We appreciate all of you guys tuning in, especially due to talk of the trade deadline last week. And if you're listening to our podcast on any of the podcast networks, Spotify or Apple, make sure you leave a review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We see you all there, all on the different social media platforms, and we appreciate all of you guys supporting us. Jay, are you ready to get into it?
Yes, sir.
100%. So we're gonna be starting off kind of, talking about some of the trades a little bit more in depth. We're 5 days past the trade deadline. So we're gonna give a bit more thoughts on that. Kind of, giving out some awards for the NBA trade deadline. And also talk about some of the non-moves, Jay. So we're gonna go through a couple of these award categories that we came up together. And we're gonna see what trade, maybe we didn't talk about enough in the last one. And maybe we can really give our even deeper thoughts into it in this episode. But we're gonna go through some of these awards to see some of the lower end trades that we didn't get that maybe deserve a bit more love. So the first award we're gonna give for the trade deadline is, Jay, out of all the trades, what was the most underrated move? The one that, the type of move where it's man, it seemed like maybe not that much in the first place, but it's gonna make a true impact later on.
Yeah, so the one to me, I feel like on the margins has to be, and this is going to show my Bulls bias a little bit, but Ayo Dosunmu to the Minnesota Timberwolves for what they were able to move off of in a trade deadline where, of course, the headline for the Timberwolves were that they were in the mix for Giannis Antetokounmpo. And the fact that they weren't able to land him, the Milwaukee Bucks did not move off of their pivot and stayed the course in terms of trying to not necessarily build around Giannis, because they didn't do very much movement at the trade deadline themselves. They end up kind of getting a buyout market guy in Cam Thomas off the waiver wire. But other than that, they didn't do very much building themselves. But They held firm to what they said going to the trade deadline, which is that they never had any real intentions of moving off of Giannis. That kind of blew up the spot for the Timberwolves, but not so much to the point that they weren't able to get better in some way, shape, or form. We obviously came into the season saying that this team was going to have issues at the point guard position. It seemed like Rob Dillingham wasn't ready. Mike Conley is obviously up in age, is ironically going to be returning to the Minnesota Timberwolves despite all of the moves that sent him away, going to the Chicago Bulls, eventually being traded to the Charlotte Hornets. Now should hit the waiver wire and return to Minnesota, but getting Ayo Dosunmu fills a role that was so important from them last year in one of my favorite role players, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He does a lot of the same things that Nickeil does. Don't get me wrong. I think that Nickeil is a better three-point shooter than Ayo Dosunmu, but I think Ayo Dosunmu has a little bit more juice as an on-ball shot creator on offense. Defensively, I think you can make the argument maybe Nickeil Alexander-Walker's a little bit better, but I don't think that gap is so significant. This was about being able to add some kind of real guard help in that backcourt. Maybe not necessarily somebody that you're asking day one to start next to Anthony Edwards. We already saw in the first two games with the Minnesota Timberwolves that like they're not necessarily asking Ayo to do too much. He's actually coming off the bench and playing a lot next to Bones Highland. But nonetheless, I think this is just one of those things for a team that desperately needed some more help at that guard position to kind of help flesh out that backcourt. You know, Ayo, like I said, Anthony Edwards. You still have oh my God, you still have DiVincenzo, Bones. Like now it feels like a more just like complete backcourt room where you have all of this versatility. Ayo can play next to Anthony Edwards. He can play next to Dante DiVincenzo. He can play next to Bones Highland. He's just very pliable, I think, within this lineup. So it's nothing that's like gonna make like national headways that like, oh, Ayo Dosunmu was on the Timberwolves. But I think that when we start to talk about things like getting to a playoff series, I think he's going to have himself a game or two that's going to like really matter. Very similar to what we saw with Nickeil Alexander-Walker just last season.
Oh no, 100%. And funnily enough, Jay, I mean, I did have a backup luckily, but that was also going to be my most underrated move of the deadline as well. The fact that they were able just to give Rob Dillingham, who you were already, planning to ship away anyway, you were already done with that experiment.
Yeah.
Some second round picks, not much capital like whatsoever, and you were still even able to make the move, freeing up the cap space, but also like being like having the room for like next season to be able to re-sign him, because like we knew that any team that would try to trade for Ayo Dosunmu would probably want to sign him to a long-term deal past the season. And with the trade of Mike Conley and the trade of that they made like earlier on, where they traded basically contracts for no value back whatsoever, I think that the Timberwolves did a good job with pivoting, even though they couldn't get Giannis Antetokounmpo, that they were still able to get someone who's going to be a real part of that playoff rotation. And I know that Dante DiVincenzo has been starting a lot this year, and he's, had a solid role there himself, near 40% from three. But there's going to be some games like Nickeil Alexander-Walker did in the previous Timberwolves playoff runs. I was gonna have some good games. He can catch fire, Jay. He can definitely catch fire as a member of the Bulls in the past. And he'll end some games there for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like you mentioned, there's like a couple of good games that are going to be key come playoff time. A good key point of attack defender, so it doesn't really take away from their identity. It's just a very good on the margins move that even though you couldn't make a swing, you knew that you got better like for the season, and also hopefully you're able to bring him back long term, filling up the Nickeil Alexander-Walker role. So yeah, Ayo Dosunmu. Hopefully, he only played one game so far. Hasn't been able to hit a three, but he hit 1 3 so far as a member of the as a Timberwolves. Hopefully, he can continue to find his footing there. Either be the sixth man like Nickeil was, or maybe sometime there's gonna be some matches where he can actually start too. So definitely a really good move for them. And as for the Bulls, I mean, you got a bunch of second round picks for all the guys that you were trying to trade, but the Timberwolves definitely came up big here getting Ayo.
Yeah, I think from a value perspective, the fact that, you were able to get out of this without having to move a first for Ayo was kind of expected. If you couldn't get a first for Kobe, it seemed like the market for Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White were relatively similar. I think you could even make the argument that the Bulls may have even gotten more as far as long-standing in exchange for Ayo than they even did for Kobe, given the fact that like Colin Sexton comes off of the books at the end of the year. And like, if we're being honest, like outside of that, do we really think like Ousmane Dieng is like a long-term fit on the team. Like those are the type of things where like you have to really ask yourself a question about what you feel as real value. Again, this is a million and one second round picks added. There are questions about what Rob Dillingham could be for this team, what Leonard Miller can be for this team. Like there are interesting fits across the board, but I mean, again, looking at the value strictly from the Timberwolves perspective, as far as talking about like a sneaky pickup that like could move the needle for them, again, as a team that didn't land Giannis and probably was the best setup to get Giannis based off all the reports going into the last day of the NBA trade deadline, at least they got something on that day, and they got something that genuinely addresses a need that we've been discussing has been plaguing them since the very beginning of the season. Now, again, does it give them so much of a primo shot creator that it takes away some of the responsibilities we've been having to point out as far as Anthony Edwards having to be a primary decision maker? No, I think actually this doubles down and saying, okay, we got ourselves another defensive 3-and-D oriented guard. Yes, Ayo Dosunmu does have a little bit of on-ball juice to him, but like this is another guy who's more of like a wing guard, point of attack defender type, right? This is like, again, in the mold of like your Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He has the ability to handle a rock a little bit, but how much offense are you going to run through him?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's also like a better playmaker than a lot of the guards already on the Timberwolves roster.
Yeah.
And as much as they like Dante DiVincenzo, and as much as he's been like solid for them this year, we know that his time especially when his time with the New York Knicks, he works best off the ball. So the fact that you're able just to get an on-ball creator, again, not just for himself, but it has some decent, playmaking chops. I mean, like it's nothing like too crazy, but the same thing. At least like he's probably going to do a little bit better on that end than on that facet than of Rob Dillingham that they were trying to incorporate into their roster. But for someone who's like this permeable to many rosters, and I think that's the reason why he probably had a bit more value than say a Kobe White, just because you need certain circumstances for Kobe White to like really succeed, especially because he's now really the strongest defender. A lot of teams would like to use an Ayo Dosunmu. You saw that in the market that there was for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Yes, Nickeil is a little bit of a taller guy, maybe a better defender, but Ayo provides so much value to so many different teams that he could basically like fit in almost everywhere. So I think that's why the Timberwolves are like, we could fit him in. He kind of fits already what we were doing. We don't have to change too much, and as long as he's hitting his shots like he has been, honestly, throughout most of his season with the Bulls. I mean, this has been a career year for him in the when he was at the Bulls so far. So hopefully he continue to do that and have a good run there with the Timberwolves. It's been a while since he's been playing like actual playoff basketball. So it's gonna be interesting to see like how they incorporate him there.
It's funny. I think everybody that the Chicago Bulls sold off at this trade deadline has a chance to play real postseason basketball this season.
Point, yeah.
Whether you look at Vooch, obviously with the Boston Celtics, he's a shoe-in to play in the playoffs. It feels like Dosunmu with the Timberwolves, a shoe-in to play in the postseason. Will be interesting to see whether or not Kobe White and the Charlotte Hornets end up making a run. They look like they're on a good trajectory to do so. Of course, they got their 9-game winning streak snapped by the Detroit Pistons the other day. There was a couple of things snapping in that game, quite frankly, but that's neither here nor there. That's a team that is kind of on the rise right now. And, being a North Carolina kid, it'll be interesting to see how he fits in with them. He already seems pretty interested and intrigued with the idea of joining the roster. Still kind of nursing the injury that kept him out the last couple of games for the Chicago Bulls. So he's not going to return until after the All-Star break. But I think the Chicago Bulls, the Chicago Bulls helped set up a couple of really solid playoff teams by giving them some on-the-margin additions at this trade deadline.
Yeah, no, 100%. I feel like there's a lot of, again, a lot of the players that the Bulls were able to ship out were, address the needs of a lot of these teams that were able to trade for them. At least the Celtics got their center. The Hornets got basically a better version of Colin Sexton, let's be completely honest. And then Ayo finally gets to go on a playoff team. So, super good move for them. Like I mentioned, that was the most underrated move for me, in terms of my other my initial one, but my backup one here, and I think this one deserves some love too. It's kind of the other side to the Zubac trade, because I think that the Los Angeles Clippers picking up Ben Mathurin is a pretty low key pickup for them, because you already know what Ben Mathurin's role is going to be over there, because we've seen it fleshed out in a big way over the last 2 years. He basically fills the Norman Powell role, if you think about it, Jay. Norman Powell was like a plus 20 point per game scorer, pretty damn efficient, which is something that Ben Mathurin is still trying to work on. But we've seen in this Clipper system that someone like a Ben Mathurin can succeed, and Norman
Mm,
Powell was the blueprint of that. And funnily enough, we're talking about this today, where Ben Matherin's gonna be, making his debut for the Clippers. You're gonna know when this episode comes out how he does. We want to hopefully he actually does well for them in tonight's game. But we've seen that it works there in the Clippers, and with the Harden money off the books, and we were waiting like, what is the offer that the Pacers are gonna give? Are they gonna end up re-signing him? It did make sense for that roster, but now with the direction that this Clippers team is going, especially with the addition of Darius Garland, who's gonna be on the team for the next couple of years, it makes sense for them to re-sign a Ben Mathurin, and then you're giving up, obviously Vika Zubac, who was a, candidate for Defensive Player of the Year last year. But if you're trying to
mm.
go with this new youth movement, Ben Mathurin is one of those guys that you want to keep around. And learning from someone like a Kawhi Leonard, learning from like a learning system with a lot of these vets on this team, could be something very much beneficial to him. So I'm excited to see because I think he slots into that starting lineup nicely. Again, potential backward mate for someone like a Darius Garland. I don't know how that's going to be like defensively go down the line, but as of right now, especially with Darius Garland out, he's going to get a lot of opportunities. He's going to make a good chance to make some money. So I'm excited to see, even though people are like, man, excited to see what Zubac looks like on the Pacers next year. I'm kind of excited to see what Ben Mathurin does in a new situation where, let's be honest, he's going to get a lot more opportunity here beside of Kawhi Leonard being basically the number 2 scoring option over there in LA.
I mean, there's also a full blown green light as Benedict
Yeah.
Mathurin. Again, similar. Like I think you made a really great analogy there, saying it's very similar to the Norman Powell role of last season of just needing that go to number 2 scorer next to Kawhi Leonard. Yes, James Harden was the guy who helped keep things afloat, but he did a lot of his dirty work as the setup man that kind of just kept everything flowing properly, especially in the half court offense. But TV, it's funny when I look at the youth movement for this LA Clippers team. It's funny because I look at some of the guys that are on the roster when I think about how they move forward. Because I mean, we have to be honest. There's a likelihood that they're going to try to move Kawhi Leonard this offseason in some version of a trade to kind of
Yeah.
really complete the overhaul, right? So the real question is how much of Benedict Mathurin will we see this season next to Kawhi Leonard? He is set to make his debut, as you mentioned beforehand. So it'll be interesting to see how that first day out kind of helps him. But you think about Darius Garland, Benedict Mathurin, John Collins, Chris Dunn, Derrick Jones Jr. to a lesser degree. I like Kobe Sanders and Bones Miller as well. I kind of think of this team, the Island of Misfit Toys version of the LA Clippers from 01-02. Remember that Lamar Odom team that had
Yeah.
like Corey Maggette and like who are some of the other guys that come up like Darius Miles, Quentin
Coutinho
Richardson.
Mobley.
Yes, Coutinho Mobley, like just the Island of Misfit Toys where it's like we're gonna play small ball, we're gonna get out in the run, we're gonna get out and run, we're gonna thrive in transition. I actually pulled it up recently. They were a team that I mean, they weren't anything to write home about. They were 15th in points per game that season, 17th in opponents' points per game. They ranked 11th on offense that year. And their pace of play wasn't anything crazy necessarily at the time, but they were just a team that you turn on the tape and they were just a very exciting team, especially in the open floor. I think especially with having Darius Garland and Benedict Mathurin at the helm of all of that, this could be a really interesting team that just likes to play up and down basketball, very up-tempo style, and just, I mean, hey, when everybody's healthy, it's going to be a lot of driving to the basket. That much I know. There's going to be a lot of driving to the basket. There's going to be a lot of mid-range opportunities. I think that this LA Clippers team, for what was a pretty unexpected pull the trigger on a rebuild, kind of just randomly placed in the middle of this season, I think you could have done a lot worse than Benedict Mathurin. Now, having to pay him this summer obviously is not the greatest consolation prize. I think you would also make the argument that, in a situation where you're moving off of a center like a Vika Zubac, where many are wondering whether or not last season was a flash in the pan year. Remember, we talked about it a lot earlier on
Yeah.
this year. Can he build off of the fact that he was final 3 in DPOY last season, and the stats don't necessarily reflect it. So there is a bit of a sell low aspect to a Vika Zubac this season, and to get it.
Honestly, I think they so high. Freaking 2 unprotected first. No one thought
Well,
they were going to go for that. In 2 years ago.
yeah, I mean
Yeah.
the 2 unprotected. I mean, it again maybe that all does maybe you could say sell high. I think it all depends on where that pick from this year ends up landing, right? With all those weird,
Yeah.
interesting protections attached to it. So it just depends. I think it depends on how you view it. But I think the mere fact that they were able to potentially land a lottery pick this year, paired with being able to get Benedict Mathurin, yes, you're essentially paying, the Clippers for eventually going on to pay Benedict Mathurin this upcoming summer with that first round pick. But I think they did as well as you probably could do, especially if that first round pick conveys. I mean, because
Yes.
they desperately kind of need to get back into this draft class, given the fact that their draft is owned by the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, no, 100%. But yeah, I think at least like what they got going on in an ideal world, they get like a top 5 to 9 pick, which is like the only way to get that pick is if it lands 5 to 9. But if they're able to get that, pair it up with a Ben Mather and pair it up with a Darius Garland, maybe Kawhi Leonard just ride out the contract. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, like one of the big reasons why he went to the Clippers is he wanted to stay home. So if he does want to continue to be here, and maybe they have a good end to the year here, maybe he thinks they could build something here. Who knows? I think this team is still like not great, but their season is far from over. I think
Right.
so. I still think the season's far from over. So it's definitely something to keep a lookout from. And again, as the time of recording, it's going to be his first game as a member of the Clippers. Hopefully, this is going to be a good start to him. Funnily enough, his last game with the Pacers was against the Houston Rockets, where he actually played really damn well, 25.7 rebounds. His first game with the Clippers, facing the Houston Rockets. So the Houston Rockets are very familiar with what he could do against them. Let's see if we can continue that good work there. Jay, next award we're going to do, you could say probably like this is more of like a negative thing more than anything. The WTF award. And this goes
Yeah.
to either the trader team that either did nothing or just did a trade that just didn't understand. Who are you going to give the WTF award for the NBA trade deadline?
I'm gonna be honest, this one was in a weird spot because there were a couple of like very strong candidates that I would say either came up as WTF because they just didn't do anything, or they came up as WTF because the trade itself felt like one where I don't necessarily know what it did for them. The one I'm gonna go with is the team that ended up not making a move on a specific player that it felt like it was a bucket that it was gonna get done. John Morant not being moved, I think just like all the writing was on the wall for this one, and it felt like the Memphis Grizzlies being so stingy about trying to get a first round pick. If you couldn't get a first round pick as the Washington Wizards for Trae Young, and that's what the market created, what made you think that John Morant was going to net a first round pick? To make things even worse, what makes you think that the asking price on John Morant is going to change that much more significantly come this upcoming summer? He's going to have one less year on his contract available. That's one less potential playoff run for a team like the Miami Heat, for example, who would have
Yeah.
loved to try to get him for part of this postseason run that now they do not have in their back pocket. Think about the Milwaukee Bucks, even another team that would have loved to be able to bring John Morant in as like somewhat of like an energizer bunny to the franchise to kind of, again, similar to when they brought in Drew Holiday, similar to when they brought in Damian Lillard, of like enticing Giannis Antetokounmpo to be like, see what we can do when you give us a chance to kind of really add some talent. And they didn't move him at all. And it's with this, I think, false perception that somehow the deal is supposed to change in some shape or form this upcoming summer. And I just don't see it. I just don't see it doing that. Yeah, you get the sour taste of the Trae Young trade out of your mouth because it's a lot further removed. So maybe the market isn't nearly as dictated by that then as it is right now. But who's coming up off of a first round pick right now for John Morant? I genuinely don't know. And I think that's the tricky part because a lot of the teams that want to get John Morant don't have the kind of first round pick that I think they would want to give up given how far out it is, to the point that it's viewed probably significantly valuable. Think about Milwaukee with what little first round picks they even have down the line. Think about a Lakers team that's still sitting on the 2031 first round pick.
Yeah.
They're not giving that up, even if they do think they're going to be good with Luka Doncic. They're going to use that pick to go get somebody they can pair with Luka, and John Morant's not the guy for that, right? Miami, a lot of the guys that Miami have to give to the Milwaukee Bucks, it sounds like the Milwaukee Bucks are not interested in Tyler Hero. maybe Khalil Ware to a lesser degree, but I think there's a weird split for Miami as
Yeah.
far as not wanting to give up Khalil Ware, but maybe the coaching staff not being so crazy about Khalil Ware. Like there's a couple
Yeah.
of different things there as well. But just not moving John Morant felt like one of those things where like it sounds like they got a little too big for their britches at the trade deadline. They think they're going to come out of this where they think if they play the patient game, they're going to get a better deal than some of the ones they saw at the trade deadline. And I think they're going to be sick to find out that like that's just not going to be the truth.
Yeah, and it was weird because like when the Jaren Jackson trade happened for them, especially the fact that they got first round picks out of that, it made
Yeah.
it seem that they were okay with not getting as much. Especially there were reports saying like, you know what, they're probably expecting like trade offers a lot of Trae Young trade. At least that's what it was like in the final like 24 to 36 hours of the trade deadline. So it felt like even if there weren't first round picks on the table, that they were willing to make the trade. That's why it was more confusing. That like, why didn't it happen? If you traded away Desmond Bain, you got rid of Dylan Brooks a couple years ago. You got rid of Jaren Jackson. You basically tore down this entire core down to the main guy of it, John Moran. Why not just finish the deal? And you can make the argument saying, yeah, maybe they're waiting for a first round pick, yada yada yada. But maybe like whatever trade they had here, and I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. If I'm the Memphis Grizzlies, whatever trade you have here, you're probably gonna have in the offseason. Now, is John Morant still being such a candidate to the team that you can't have him pass the season? I don't know. But it is, I will say, it is easier to make trades in the offseason with, the freeing up of cap. The fact that you have some teams are able to trade more first round picks. I'm not saying they're going to get it, but maybe the trade that they had at the deadline was probably going to be the same deal that they have in the offseason. So they're holding out, hoping for a chance. But I think either way, John Morant doesn't stay past July, August. He's
Yeah.
probably still by the end of the year. But if honestly, I'm kind of on the same boat as you. If you kind of did a whole tear down here, you might as well just give new coach time is it Isolo or something like that his name, like Tom Isolo, I think the Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just give him a fresh slate. You already had a bunch of guys here. Maybe that would open a chance for Walter Clayton. I mean, they're probably not going to play John Morant the rest of the season anyway, so he'll probably get opportunities still. But yeah, I just thought like once you got rid of Jaren's, like, oh man, Jaw has to be traded. And somehow, some way, probably for worse for Jaw, especially, he's still on the team, and it's just gonna be another rough like 4 months for him. I don't know about the team, but at least it's gonna be a rough 4 months for John Morant as well.
I think that's part of the element of it too, right? Is it felt like this split was so inevitable, right? After you
Yeah.
saw the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, it was like kind of similar to the Kawhi Leonard thing. You saw James Harden and Vic Zubac get traded, and even though it was so kind of at the last minute, you kind of figured like, yo, somebody's just gonna pick up the phone for Kawhi Leonard to get this done, and it never happened. Now he's got an odd man out, still there, left with basically a handful of young guys and 1,001 second round picks, and a projected top first round pick this year if the ping pong balls fall the right way. But like John Morant, like this one, again, I think I said this last podcast too. Jaren Jackson Jr., of the two of them, right? Because there were rumblings that Jaren would possibly be on the move in conversations with the Boston Celtics were targeting him. The Golden State Warriors were targeting him, right? So like I think if the New York Knicks had made a run at Jaren Jackson Jr., but of the two guys that we thought were likely to get moved at this deadline, it felt like Ja was like the guaranteed star to get moved. And the fact that he's still the one there when he's probably been the most disgruntled, when all of the conversation has been about him basically since dang near the beginning of the year, I'm just shocked, man. I'm shocked at the stubbornness around what their package package requirement for him was. Ended up making them so stubborn that they ended up resting on their laurels on it. I'm very surprised. So I'm interested to see what this summer does for John Morant's value, because in their eyes, they have to see it as a couple months removed from everything, the value goes up. I don't believe that, but I guess we'll have to see.
Hey, maybe less is more with John Morant. Less years to have to pay him maybe might be more to new teams because of that. But I will leave it off with this, and I'm gonna use the wise words of Mike Dunleavy Jr. from earlier this season. Even though you make a request, there has to be a market for you to be able for us to listen. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what it all. Maybe that's what it truly came down to, and the offers might start coming in the offseason. So we're not in those rooms. We don't truly know, but they seem pretty confident that they're probably just going to find a trade in the offseason, which, let's be honest, is going to be best for both parties.
Yeah.
Jay, my what the F award goes to in this trade deadline. You went for a team that didn't make a move. I'm going to go with a team that made a move, and that is the Golden State Warriors. And it is the end of the Jonathan Kuminga saga. After all of that, we end up with Kristaps Porzingis. The way to extend Steph Curry's championship window is to add Kristaps Porzingis. And with all the rumblings of the potential deals, honestly, which it seemed like the Bucks were very adamant in saying no to, which, good on them. You probably could get a better offer somewhere, let's be honest. But the final years of this all-time great Steph Curry, a guy who still feels like a top 10 player in basketball, and this is the lineup you're running out with. It's honestly more of a WTF, like, wow, I can't believe this. It felt like after this deadline, it felt like that was it. And that was more to what the F thing. It's like, man, it's like, we're all waiting for that one last hurrah from the Warriors, even after the Jimmy Butler trade. And we came out of this saying, man, it feels like deflating. It feels like it's over. And I think that's more WTF more than anything, because you just felt like a bigger splash was going to come, even like making a swing. Maybe, like, I was expecting more, like when we went to the trade deadline episode, that we're going to be talking about a Golden State Warrior trade, where they may have overpaid and said, man, why did they give up this much for X superstar or X star? Like, do you think this is worth it? But at least they tried.
Yeah.
Now they ended up with Kristaps Porzingis, and he's probably if he makes it like 15 more games throughout the season, that's a W if you're the Warriors. And that's still kind of unrealistic given his injury/illness history over the past 2 years. So it's just like really unfortunate to see how all things played out. At the end of the day, they got out of the Jonathan Kuminga saga. I think we've been waiting, it feels like over a year and a half for this. But the fact that this all ends and all you get out of it is a Kristaps Porzingis who we don't even know how many games he's going to play for them this year, just feels more like, what the F? This is how it's going to end in the Steph Curry era. Just feels really sad more than anything.
I mean, there's three things that I felt like I learned from the Jonathan Kuminga trade that are all unfortunate when looking at the Golden State Warriors moving forward. Number one is they shot their last arrow, TV. We talked about this in a million different episodes throughout the year. Jonathan Kuminga was their last arrow in the quiver. Like, whatever they were able to do, especially after they re-signed him this summer to that essentially 1+1 deal to be able to make his value a little bit higher as far as his contract, so that he could be matching salary with something to maybe move the needle. This was the last option they had as far as being able to do anything that could build around Steph Curry moving forward to build this roster up. Kristaps Porzingis probably was the last player that anybody had on their mind as a potential player to land for them as far as being able to move forward. It makes it even worse given the fact that Kristaps Porzingis is an expiring contract this summer. That can be viewed as a net positive or a net negative. It all depends on the circumstances of A, how much does you want in the unrestricted free agency this upcoming summer, and B, how does it affect their pursuit of other potential free agents this summer, given the fact that the list for 2026 is actually kind of fake decent, right? And they kind of have to make the most out of whatever cap space they have this summer, because their money is very much tied up in Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, who, mind you, is going to miss most of next season with his ACL tear. He did just undergo successful surgery on it, but he's going to miss most of next season, right? If not the entirety of next season. And then Draymond Green. So they're in a really weird spot. And I think the third thing, I think a lot of Warriors fans already feel this way, so it'll be interesting to hear it from somebody who's not a Warriors fan, starting with me and then passing it to you. But like, Steve Kerr sure jacked this up for the Warriors too, bro. I mean, Steve Kerr, with the way he mismanaged the Jonathan Kuminga saga as far as his on-production deployment, on-court deployment on a year-to-year basis. The 1 minute Jonathan Kuminga is featured in the starting lineup. The next minute you can't buy minutes. The next minute he's, getting DMP coaches decisions game after game. And then all of a sudden he's coming in and dropping 20 and then he only plays 10 minutes. Like there's this constant yo-yo ring around the rosy game with Jonathan Kuminga of like, do you trust him or don't you trust him? And it turned Jonathan Kuminga into so much more of an enigma than he already was. Right? He already was viewed as this young, raw talent with the Jaylen Brown upside reflection, but like, could he actualize it? All of those type of questions. You only further made those questions, an issue for other teams as far as what they were willing to give up on the trade market by not giving other teams a real good audition of seeing him on a consistent basis. So it was one of those things where I think it was a real botch job by Steve Kerr on his part as far as deploying Jonathan Kuminga, because if you don't do anything this season, knowing that you were probably going to trade him at this trade deadline, let the guy hoop. Let the guy hoop. If it costs you games, I mean, you're smack dab in the middle of the Western Conference one way or another. If it costs you games, at least at least you're giving other teams a better prospect of what they could potentially land in a trade. But by him being so much of an enigma, I think that's what created all of the hoopla and issues around the idea of being able to land Jonathan Kuminga, where the Kings wouldn't even trade for him. The Sacramento Kings TV wouldn't even trade for him.
This is why I felt like the two timeline thing never was going to work out, because for better or for worse, the Golden State Warriors won 3 championships prior to this whole two timeline thing, playing their certain way of basketball, and yes, it was very effective, but it meant everyone had to play their role to a certain extent. And they brought in a bunch of talent coming in here, and it worked out for that 1 year. That 2022 championship was like, honestly felt like such a vindication of like Steph Curry and his whole legacy, because even when like it felt like things weren't going like the Warriors way fully, they were still able to like go into this new era and get a championship. So it doesn't so no matter what happens like going forward, and them like however you feel about this two timeline thing, they got a championship out of it, so they can't really like fully complain at the end of the day. But this two timeline thing was never going to work because Steve Kerr knows what it takes to win a Steph Curry championship. And trying to get these raw talents out of college, through the draft, you need to make sure that these guys fully fit your roster in order for them to really succeed. And when you don't have those players, even if they're high lottery picks, and we saw this with James Wiseman too, we saw this with Jonathan Kuminga, if you don't fully fit in, he's going to favor the guys who fit more his vision more than anything, because he knows that's what it's going to take to win a championship. There's not the flexibility that you're going to get from other teams where they might, switch up their play style a little bit to kind of fit your talents in there to really uplift that. Yeah. Steve Kerr knows that the best way to get the most of the Golden State Warriors is to uplift Steph Curry and make sure that this Steph Curry is the best what he can be. And when other players can't fall into that, they fall to the wayside.
Yeah.
So this is why it wasn't never going to work. And why I was so confused with the timeline thing in the first place. The one guy that actually fit the systems, Jordan Poole, they got rid of. So that's kind of crazy at the end of the day, looking back at it. But if you weren't going to build the team and make the trades and the necessary moves around Steph Curry, then you're just doing him and his greatness a disservice at the end of the day. That's why it was just never going to work. Sure, maybe the window would have shut a little bit closer, but there wasn't much of a window to begin with. Again, you were... I didn't say looked into the 2022 championship, but everything fell in the way that like you needed to get that. It wasn't like the overwhelming talent that you had. Everything kind of just like fell into place for that year. A career Jordan Poole year, Klay Thompson looking like solid before he completely fell off. Everything fell into place, but you start to stick with it. And when these guys weren't able to conform to your system, you can't play to their needs. They can't play to their strengths. And that's what ultimately like was the downfall of this like two timeline system. And now you don't have much around Steph Curry to like end off his career with, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, at the end of the day, they won a championship with him. Like he was there and he was actually part of the rotation. But things ended the way it did because Steve Kerr and his system, like he wasn't gonna move off of it, and they weren't gonna change things for Jonathan Kuminga. That's what it really came down to.
I mean, similar to what we said about the Chicago Bulls earlier, right? They fell into the trap of something that the great New England's Patriots coach Bill Belichick once said that it's better to sell a year early than a year late. And this felt like one with Jonathan Kuminga that although the money aspect of it probably made him a better commodity as far as matching salary, this was something that they should have been really putting emphasis on trying to get off of last season when a lot of the hoopla first started.
Yes.
Heading into what was a very toxic contract extension dispute, it was the best chance for them to be able to make the most out of the situation. Again, being able to re-up his contract in a way where he ended up making a little bit over 20 million over the next 2 years. 20 million each of the next 2 years. If you count in that player option for next year, yes, it helped. But I mean, now, especially, hindsight is 2020, unfortunately. But you look at the circumstances for this team now, and you just ask yourself, like, dang, not even ask yourself, you clearly sat on an asset for too long. And like you mentioned beforehand, there was never a version of this Warriors team that was going to prioritize development of lottery picks over whatever position Steph Curry to be in the best position to be able to win another championship. So the idea would have been trying to flip these guys as quickly as humanly possible. I would make the argument that the James Wiseman thing went too long. If you remember that, even that saga of things for the Golden State Warriors went a lot longer than it should have for a guy that just clearly did not fit their roster. Many people view James Wiseman as a little bit of a swing pick when he was taken. A lot of people still look back to that LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards draft. I remember the rumors were that Steve Kerr wasn't big on Anthony Edwards going into the draft class because of a lot of other things that didn't have anything to do with on the court.
Yes.
LaMelo Ball felt like the ideal pick, and they end up, not taking him at that number 2 spot. I'm sure they regret the crap out of that now. I mean, there's a lot of mismanagement as far as dating back to even just that Jonathan Kuminga draft, where just drafting Jonathan Kuminga in that situation, given the intel around him as, again, a raw talent, somebody who leans more on his athleticism, needs the ball in his hands as a score first forward. These were all things that seemed very anti-Warriors back then. And those bad habits and I don't even call him necessarily bad because he's still a young player trying to, make a name for himself in the league.
Exactly.
But for a player that clearly does not fit the philosophy of the Golden State Warriors, this felt destined to fail from the beginning, and they just kind of were able to survive it cool running style for the longest. But now, it reaped its ugly head in Kristaps Porzingis. That's where it all crescendos back to, was all of that, the drama, the issues, the press conferences, the contract dispute, all to end up with Kristaps Porzingis, who might play 15 games for you, like you said earlier. I mean, that's sick.
Yeah, the minute he got there, he didn't make his debut for the Warriors, and then they made an update saying he's not going to be available until probably after the All-Star break, which is the Kristaps Porzingis. And again, it's unfortunate with the whole, heart rate thing. It's something probably he can't control, which is really frustrating on his end. But they traded for damaged goods at the end of the day. Steve Kerr, you want to bench Jonathan Kuminga? Well, Kristaps Porzingis will bench himself. So that's what's going to end up happening. So unfortunate there. Just sucks that this feels like basically the end of the Golden State Warriors era, which felt like there was maybe one more chance for one more swing. And they probably should have done it, but they didn't. Next award, Jay, though. The best non-move. Now, this is interesting because we talked a lot about the moves that we made. And we talked about, again, you talked about the move that wasn't made with John Morant. But in terms of a positive non-move, the best non-move of the deadline, what do you think it was?
I think it was the San Antonio Spurs. I think a lot of people wanted the Spurs to do something, and I'm not mad at the idea of a young team just wanting to stay young and be, a squad that builds off the continuity that's got them this far. They're second in the Western Conference. They have a real good chance to usurp the Oklahoma City Thunder as the number 1 seed, with the fact that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to miss time. AJ Mitchell set to miss some time as well. There's a really good chance that the Spurs can make a run at the top seed in the West. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? It's one of those things. Their 3-guard lineup is working. The biggest question marks around their roster has to do with Jeremy Sohan, who was kind of fell out of favor in their rotation, and probably Kelly Olynyk. They didn't need to do anything. Sure, could they have went after a Gershon Yabusele? Sure, that could have worked out. There was an idea where they could have added that to their front court rotation. I also think that Luke Kornet just has played really well for them as a backup center. That fits kind of exactly what they need in a rim protector behind Victor Wembanyama when he's off the floor. that works. Could you have moved off of Keldon Johnson to get maybe a more established scoring type of small forward? Sure. I also think that Keldon Johnson's relationship with Victor Wembanyama matters almost as much as his on the court production. And I think Keldon Johnson hasn't been bad necessarily either, to be quite frank.
He's been a
So
great bench player, like one of the better bench players in the league this year.
yeah, so I mean, when you think about it, right, you're not moving off of De'Aaron, you're not moving off of Dylan, you're not moving off of Stephon. Wemby's an untouchable. And then beyond that, anybody else that you could think of that would even, warrant moving for why, right? It would be like for why? Like maybe the only thing I can say, and I noticed this on the trade market as something that was kind of interesting when I was looking at something for covering the Orlando Magic, was like there were a couple of guys where I was like, dang, a couple of seconds really could have landed you like a high profile 3-point shooter, like Vic Krejci, for example. I don't know if we're gonna really like get into this, given the fact that our last award isn't really necessarily in favor of this line of work. But like if you go back to like most underrated moves, right? Like Vic
Yeah.
Krejci landing with the Portland Trailblazers. Like
Yeah.
Vic Krejci could have landed anywhere and would have been a really solid on the margin pickup. And for a Portland Trailblazers team that struggles to shoot the three ball, they're getting like an automatic 41% on like 5 to 6 attempts per game guy at the guard position who also has a little bit of upside as a guy who can put the ball on the floor. Like that's one of those guys that like, yeah, with the Spurs 8 million first round picks, could they give up a butt cheek late first round pick or some decent second round picks together to get Vic Krejci? Or could they have put together a better like little miniature package to get Luke Kennard over the Los Angeles Lakers? Like I think those are two like interesting names to add to the floor spacing for their team if they wanted it. But I mean, then you would ask yourself, with all the guards that they have in their rotation, like when do those guys get to play, right? So I think they're in a perfect situation where they're at. And although the Spurs probably could have made a move, and with all the draft capital that they have and interesting prospects on the back end of the bench that they do have, they could have done something. But again, why? What for? And so I'm actually kind of glad that they stood pat.
I don't know, 100%. I'm glad that like they're one of those teams, and yes, they are the number 2 team in the West, and people, we're comparing it to the Pistons situation. They're like, why not make a trade there? I mean, they didn't really end up making a big move either, but people were kind of expecting, at least a few like small pocket of people were expecting the same from the Spurs. Man, I mean, like, it's not like there's like a glaring, I wouldn't say there's a glaring weakness on this team, but this is the sort of year where it feels like you're ahead of schedule. No need to be rash.
Yes.
And it's not like the Pistons where you're like, okay, we can maybe use this Tobias Harris contract and maybe flip that into something else. You don't really have those type of like assets. I mean, sure, you can maybe move off Devin Vassell, but he's having kind of like a struggling year compared to his previous years, so maybe his trade value is a little bit lower than you would expect. Yes, you could have moved Harrison Barnes, sure, but with everything that's going on right now, you just don't want to mess up with something that's good. And I guess you can make the same argument for the Kings, but I feel like there was like a glaring, position there that needed to be filled, especially in terms of offensive wise. But the Spurs team exactly. You've seen the jumps of Stephon Castle. You've seen that De'Aaron Fox is playing at a borderline all-star level, and then of course Wemby is Wemby. There's no need to mix things up right now.
Yeah.
If you want to maybe like you want to have like a full season under books and then reevaluate in the offseason, that is something that that makes more sense. I mean, when you think about the San Antonio Spurs, even back like 10, 20 years ago, have they ever really made trades at the deadline with like a Tim Duncan, like Tony Parker era? No, not really. And they're
De'Aaron Fox actually is the only one in recent memory that's logged, actually. So
honestly, it kind of just falls the same way. I mean, yes, they could have done it, but they could have done it a lot of times back then too. And this is just kind of the way they like to move things. They don't like to make like rash decisions like in the middle of the season. And fair enough to them. So they're a young team. They still got a lot of room to grow. And if they want to make a trade, they have these guys under the books for a while. And you can like make a trade in the offseason where it's easier to make trades, where there's probably more draft picks or you have more stuff to trade by then. So yeah, I'm glad that the Spurs like didn't really like make a move. I'm excited to see what the rest of this season kind of looks like for them.
Yeah.
For my favorite non-move, and it's gonna feel really weird to say right now, but I'm gonna go with the Sacramento Kings, but on one particular deal, because there are reports. Obviously, there's the biggest trade rumor between for the Sacramento Kings was Sabonis going to the Toronto Raptors, right? People were like, "Man, this feels like the perfect thing for the Raptors." Are they like how many first round picks are going to attach to Jakob Poeltl to try and get off of his contract? someone leaked the final trade offer that the Raptors gave to the Kings, and the final trade offer was R.J. Barrett, Jakob Poeltl, and 4 second-round picks for Domantas Sabonis straight up. And kudos to the Sacramento Kings and Scott Perry, they didn't bite. Because I feel like that was a potential fleecing of the century right there from the Toronto Raptors, trying to give up not even a single first-round pick, multiple seconds, and R.J. Barrett, and a horrible, what it looks like right now, Jakob Poeltl contract.
Mm.
I think the Kings did a good job in not panicking and not having that trade there right now. Because let's be honest, that trade is probably still there in the summer.
Yeah.
That trade's probably still there in the summer if
Yeah.
you're a Toronto Raptors, especially with an expiring RJ deal that you don't want to re-sign. So making the rash move now and trading away Sabonis when there's probably again, easy, more people willing to make that trade in the offseason when he has less years on his contract is this smart front office thing to do. And we haven't said that much about the Sacramento Kings. I mean, they traded away Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder for DeAndre Hunter, who feels like he's not going to be a great fit on this team either, a very much sideways move. And it felt like it was going to be, they were heading down that path with the Sabonis trade. But I'm glad as a front office, even though I want to say, kudos to Bobby Wester of the Toronto Raptors for not, overpaying for Sabonis. Good job on the Kings and Scott Perry for not biting on a buy low offer and just saying, you know what, we'll just wait it out. There's no need to make a rash decision. It's not like he's going to help us win that much. We're one of the worst teams in the league. Let's just wait till the offseason. I think where the Memphis Grizzlies probably should have traded him now and not wait till the offseason, I think the Kings did a good job with waiting till the offseason because I feel like with less years on his deal, Sabonis might be a bit more valuable to some teams. Yeah, more enticing for sure.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for the Sacramento Kings is just, it depends on what their direction is, bro. I think that's the biggest thing because there's a weird part of me that feels like that DeAndre Hunter move was with the intention of keeping this team the same. And that's a scary feeling. That DeAndre Hunter is actually supposed to be an addition to what's supposed to be a team in DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Domantas Sabonis, Keegan Murray, Nick Clifford, and then DeAndre Hunter as a guy who's supposed to legitimately fit on that team. Again, DeAndre is 28 years old. He fits as that 3-and-D wing style that if you listen to a lot of what Scott Perry's, spoken on as far as his, the type of archetype he favored, DeAndre Hunter is the kind of player that he's wanted. I think you've seen that just in the last handful of draft classes with Keegan Murray and Nick Clifford. Those are two guys that are very in the similar ilk of what DeAndre Hunter is, and I think it's just him kind of doubling down on that ready-made older player that can come in and contribute from out the gate. And that's the part where the non-move aspect, with not just Domantas, but all four of them, Malik Monk, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Domantas, by not moving any of them and bringing in an older player like DeAndre Hunter, it just makes you wonder, bro, are they committing to the bit? Because if they're committing even further to this...
Oh, yeah, no, overall, I still think they had a pretty bad deadline. But with a lot of their guys that they're planning on trading, less years is more for what they can get back. Because with all the guys on their roster, people don't want to take the long-term money. People don't want that long-term money on their books. So having these guys at a 1 or 2 year deal is definitely more enticing to some teams that are willing to trade for them. And we look at them, and Jay, I think where we're coming out of this is that we know that the Kings are stupid. We know that they've made stupid trades along the way to here. We're just glad they weren't this stupid to make this even kind of dig themselves even a deeper hole. Which look, at least I'm giving them a small applause. I'm giving them a little bit of a golf clap for saying, you know what, good job for not accepting a really bad buy-low offer for one of the probably worst contracts in the league in Jakob Poeltl. Not gonna lie.
Hey, man, I guess we got to give credit where credit is due. Avoiding self-sabotage for the Sacramento Kings is quite the feat.
It's a win. It's some sort of win for the Sacramento Kings. It's something. Shout out to the Kings. Shout out to the Kings for doing that. And, they might still get a top pick. No, I mean, they feel like the type of team that's going to drop.
I think that's the other part of the element, right? I think that's part of the overall play here, right? It's again, they're already bad enough to the point that they could land, a top pick kind of just falling into it by just being bad. Like, even with the team that they have right now, they're just bad enough to still land a top lottery pick added to the group that they have now. And maybe they just start to instill some unnecessary amount of belief. I have no idea. But again, like I said, we're going to give credit where credit is due. This is going to be our version of like a win is a win when talking about the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's what we're gonna end up giving here, just because, like, again, I was following this whole thing as a Toronto Raptor fan. It's like, okay, we know what Domantas Sabonis is the trade target for the Toronto Raptors, and we just like we as a Raptor fans, like, please don't overpay, and we're like, okay, we didn't overpay, but I'm glad but at least on the Kings side of things, if I'm the Kings fans, I'm like, I'm glad we didn't make this trade, because we've had a lot of teams fleece us in the past. We're glad that we at least made a solid move here by doing nothing. So, in terms of a no move sort of trade, the best non-move, I think the Kings deserve some love over there. But yeah, those are some of the awards that we have for the NBA trade deadline. We want to hear your thoughts. Again, we talked about the best non-move, the WTF trade /team, and the most underrated move. We want to hear some of your answers that we didn't talk about down below. We gave a lot of good ones here too, but we want to hear your thoughts as well down below. Jay, it's a weird transition because we were just talking about one of the worst teams in the NBA in the Sacramento Kings. Let's now go talk about the Contenders Bubble, because now we know what the NBA is looking like. We know what these rosters are looking like. I'm not saying it's going to finalize rosters. The buyout market is still going to be a big thing when we go into February and March. There's going to be some teams that are buying out players, waiving 10-day contracts, all of that. But we basically have the crux of each roster available right now. So what we're going to do, and we've done this in years past, creating the championship bubble. Sometimes it's a lot of teams, sometimes it's very little teams, where we feel like these teams legitimately have a path to the NBA championship. Yeah. And what we're going to do for this one, Jay, is I'm going to list some teams. Some of them are going to be pretty obvious. Some of them are going to be not so obvious. But we're going to discuss whether we should include them in the championship bubble. Sound good?
Yep, works for me.
Okay, we're going to go into this. I guess we'll start with the obvious ones. This is Oklahoma City Thunder. We got to put them in this bubble for sure.
Pretty strong lock. Pretty strong lock. Should get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander back. Should get AJ Mitchell back. Jalen Williams is back healthy. Should work in his favor. Chet Holmgren is probably the leading favorite for DPOY right now. Like, they're calmly, I feel like, in that conversation.
Yeah, and don't worry about some of their key players missing games. I feel like they were doing this last year too with Caruso and Hartenstein, stuff like that. Yeah. When the playoffs come, they're going to play. They're going to be ready to play. And yeah, I don't know if you saw this stat, but ever since they added Jared McCain, when him and Isaiah Joe are on the floor, they're apparently a plus 20 net rating, because for some reason their shooting is out of this world when those two are on the floor. And we talked about them needing a bit more shooting on that team. Jared McCain has really opened up the floor for them already earlier on.
Man, we talked about it in underrated trades earlier. Like, Jared McCain definitely could have been in that conversation as one of the most underrated ones for a team that didn't really need him, but is, of course, gonna find a way to maximize his most translatable NBA skill, which is shooting the absolute skin off the ball. Like,
yeah, super excited for
do it again. Stealing from Philly again, might I add. Isaiah Joe, hilariously enough, stealing from Philly once again.
Basically a higher upside Isaiah Joe with like maybe some on-ball potential there too. So great move again from the Thunder. We could have said of them as like one of the biggest winners and stuff like that too. But yeah, the Thunder for sure. I think we could put the Denver Nuggets here with a healthy Nikola Jokic pretty comfortably.
I think that's going to have a lot to do with the health of the team overall. They've been dealing with injuries across the board all season. Now Peyton Watson is set to miss some time with I think a grade 1 sprain of his own.
Hamstring sprain. Yeah, that was
so that's one of those things that I do want to take into consideration. They've been dealing with injuries across the board. Murray's missed a little bit of time. Jokic obviously missed about a month. Aaron Gordon has been in and out of the lineup. Christian Brown has been in and out of the lineup. Cam Johnson still out, if I'm not, or no, he actually just came back.
He just came back.
I think recently. So I mean, this team has been pretty injury riddled, and of all teams, they're actually in the conversation to go after Lonzo Ball on the waiver market, as if they needed any more, overtime push for their medical staff. This is a team that I think is going to all be based off the injury luck for them. Of course, if they're healthy, in the mix for a championship, at all times when you have Jamal Murray playing at an all-star level and Nikola Jokic being Nikola Jokic. But that injury bug for them has been quite the issue for them this season. So they're like a fringe contender to me. They're a little bit, they're in the bubble, but they're on the edges a little bit.
Yeah, but I kind of feel the same way. But we just know what this team can do in the playoffs with a healthy Nikola Jokic, and then again Jamal Murray. Like, we don't have to. He doesn't have to warm up now. He's like fully like locked into the season as well. So roster construction wise, if healthy, yes, Aaron Gordon's probably not going to be back till mid-March, which is really unfortunate for them too.
Yeah.
But with these guys available, and as long as Jokic is available, I'm good with you. Yes, they're in the bubble, but they're kind of like teetering a little bit. They're in the bubble. They're in the bubble.
They're definitely, they fall into my one injury away kind of team. Like, they're one of them where, like, if that last week or two comes up towards the postseason and they lose, I think anybody within their core 7 to 8 man rotation, quite frankly, it could cause real problems for a team that's honestly, TV, not as deep as we thought they were when the season started.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Tim Hardaway. He's been pretty solid for them this year. I really hope that Cam Johnson like really finds his way and like actually like gets back into the flow of things, especially with about like 2 months left in the season. And if they end up strong, I think we're gonna feel a lot more confident about them. But yes, they're in the bubble, but like they're kind of drifting a little bit. They're drifting a little bit for sure.
Yeah.
Next team I want to put in here though, the San Antonio Spurs.
So they're in the bubble, but I'm always a little apprehensive about young teams in their first run. I think we have to look at that Oklahoma City Thunder first postseason 2 years ago where they ended up kind of running into the Dallas Mavericks, and that series, which felt like the Oklahoma City Thunder probably should have ran away with it, ended up going in favor of the Dallas Mavericks. Now, a lot of the things that happened in that series, I think the San Antonio Spurs can combat because they have somebody that the Oklahoma City Thunder, quite frankly, don't have, and that's Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, I was gonna say Victor is definitely
that's quite the equalizer. But I would also say at the same time that that's just still a very, very youthful team. They're in the mix because they play well against the top teams, and I think that does count to a certain extent for what they can be as far as competing in the championship picture. This might sound a little odd to some people, but they're very similar to the Denver Nuggets to me as far as being that team that's right there on the edge, just because of the youth aspect of it. They're not as much of a lock for me.
I don't want to say a lock either. I was thinking about it too. I think they're close to Denver Nuggets, but I think the Nuggets are in because they've proven it to us that they're able to do it at come playoff time, and we know that they have a bunch of playoff performance in there. We don't know what it is with the Spurs. I feel like they're touching the bubble, but they're not in it yet.
Yes.
So you want to say that at least like an agreement that they're both maybe just outside the bubble?
Yeah, maybe just, again, it might come off as disrespectful to certain people who have just seen what the San Antonio Spurs have done this season. But quite frankly, we're talking about postseason play now. So this is one of those things where you take into consideration what veterans they do have on the team. And they've got some guys that have some real postseason experience. Shout out to my boy Harrison Barnes, right? But at the same time, this team is very young. A 7-game series is a different animal. Now, they won the season series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, I believe, 4-1.
4-1, yes.
That's impressive. Now, it's the regular season. We have to be careful about that. We've seen that in the past a handful of times. TV, once upon a time, we were talking about how that Phoenix Suns team seemed to have had the Minnesota Timberwolves number, and it did not matter. It did not matter come postseason time. They got full-blown 4-0 swept, and it was clean clocked. I'm not saying that's going to happen to the San Antonio Spurs. Honestly, if it happens against a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder, that would mean they made it to the conference finals. So quite the achievement for them, quite frankly, at that situation. But at the same time, again, man, that youth scares me. This Western Conference is very top heavy, but it really is a dogfight at the same time. Not everybody up in this top 6 is a guaranteed contender just because they're in the mix, with 30+ wins so far already this far into the season.
For sure. I'm completely on board with you there. So currently right now, you have 2 teams in the bubble. One kind of like edged it because of the injuries that they had so far this year in the Denver Nuggets, and the Thunder, who are basically the locks of locks that are in the championship bubble. Spurs just out. Next team, though, we're going to stick it to the West a little bit longer. The Houston Rockets.
I'm putting them right there with the Denver Nuggets too. They're another one of those one injury away kind of teams to me that I feel like the lack of depth that they have on their team. I think the loss of, you want to talk about something that's so under discussed this year. The loss of Steven Adams, I think, is gonna matter so much in the postseason.
Show me what their plays are. You seen how much they dominated
Yes,
the Warriors in that first round in terms of the rebounding aspect. Losing out on
yes.
Steven Adams is pretty damn big for them.
Yeah, I mean, people are not talking about it enough, but not being able to replace Steven Adams, truthfully, because I mean, they're trying to do it through the form of Clint Capella,
I was
and
gonna say that's
it's
Clint.
it's
Yeah.
just not the same thing. We know how different, how much of a difference maker on the offensive and defensive glass Steven Adams is, dating back
And
to his
screen
time with
setting
Oklahoma
too.
City Thunder.
And screen setting, man. Screen setting is
Yes.
massive with him.
Yes, I mean, a lot of people will make jokes about it, but that massive lineup that had Amin Thompson at the point guard position, KD at the two, Jabari Smith, Alperen Şengün, and then Steven Adams at the five, it was one of the more potent lineups in the early portion of the season because they were killing folks on the glass. There were nights where they were winning the rebounding battle by like 15 plus. And the offensive rebounding battle was completely lopsided. Those are the type of things in the postseason, a 7-game series against teams. When you play the Denver Nuggets, who have Nikola Jokic, when you play the San Antonio Spurs, who have Victor Wembanyama, when you play even, quite frankly, a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves with Rudy Gobert, who's a very
Yeah, and
strong
Randall, both
rebounder
of those
down low,
guys are
and
always going to be on
Julius
court.
Randle, who's a good rebounder at the 4 spot. Like, having a guy who's like a bona fide, 9+ rebounds a night kind of guy in Steven Adams, with probably like, what, half of them coming on the offensive glass on a nightly basis. That's something that you are really gonna miss. Now, I want to give my flowers to Jabari Smith Jr. Jabari Smith Jr. as a second string off the bench center, small ball center at 6'10" for them. Very good fit for what he's been able to do both on the offensive end and defensive end this season. The stat sheet will not tell you a lot about what Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason, quite frankly, have done for the Rockets this season, but they have both been very, very big fits for this Rockets team so far this year. But like, I hate to put so much of the onus on Steven Adams, right, as whether or not they're like a contending team, right? But I think that's going to matter for a team that still is missing I think they still have a very big hole at the point guard position.
Yes,
And
for
didn't
sure.
address that at the trade deadline in any way. And I'm not sure how much they're going to be able to do on the waiver wire as far as that's concerned. I heard rumblings of the idea of maybe them targeting Spencer Dinwiddie, who's coming off of the European circuit. Yeah, obviously familiar with playing with Kevin Durant. That could be an interesting fit. We'll see. But the guard position, still very iffy, like what Reed Shepard's been able to do. But what does he look like against postseason physicality?
Yeah.
Still question to be desired. KD's been pissed damn near all season about why it seems like he needs to drop 30 every night in order for them to be good enough to win basketball games.
Yeah.
Is that gonna fly in the postseason? Where, I mean, look, we just saw with the Phoenix Suns with Devin Booker as his secondary option. I mean, they couldn't get past the first round with KD dropping 20 plus, 30 plus, 25 plus, 30 plus a night. If this Rockets team can't get real shot creation outside of Alperen Şengün, like, I mean, TV, they can't get the water shot off.
Yeah, no, it's really unfortunate because like I was gonna have them in the championship bubble prior to the Steven Adams injury because you just know that like those lineups have just been overwhelming at times. I mean, they found this out at the end of last regular season. That was a big part of the what's it called? A big part of it was a big part of their run, like going into the playoffs, and that's how they were able to actually like get a one up on the Warriors for the most part. So the fact that they're missing out on that, and yes, people can say, "Oh, Clint Capella is a great rebounder." This is not the same Clint Capella that the Rockets had the first time around. So it's definitely like gonna be like a tough mix. Also, people are not talking about this enough. One of their big free agent signings, Dorian Finney-Smith, came back from injury and has been garbage. Absolutely garbage this year. So the fact that you wanted him to come in and play a big part in the fact that he's like coming off of injury is looking absolutely horrible leaves a lot to be desired from their depth, and especially from a lot of us who thought he's going to be playing a big role. And Jay, he's like signed for the next like 3 years, so it's not looking great to start off with. But yeah, if I had to choose low key with this Rockets team, I was more confident earlier this season, but like you mentioned, the offense isn't really. I don't know how conducive that's going to be in the playoffs. We need like early season Shingun to really show up if they really want to be a real force here. I think like especially with their team construction. Yes, we know that KD's a true performer, but I think they feel like even like a step behind the Spurs. At least we know the Spurs team like are good, like know what they are, and they have their guys like ready, like in terms of their roster and like, the way that they're constructed. This team, like, I don't even know if they know like truly like what they have like ready going into the playoffs. I would have them outside the bubble.
Yeah, there's still there has not been enough conversation around them this season because like they just been kind of like quietly squeaking along at that 4th seed in the Western Conference, but like they do still have major holes, especially from an offensive standpoint. And I think that when you talk about playing a 7 game series against some of these teams with strong defenses, the Thunder, the Spurs, the Timberwolves, I worry about the Rockets as far as being able to generate half court offense. Like I genuinely worry about this team feeling like a completely different looking but similar rendition of those Phoenix Suns teams with KD and D Book, where it's like, okay, you got two guys who can score. In this case, Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun. You got a handful of guys who are defenders, maybe can stretch the floor a little bit, but leaves a lot to be desired outside of being like really good 3 and D wing stoppers. And that's kind of where they're at with the Houston. And we saw that team in the form of the Phoenix Suns get whooped on over the course of 4 straight games against the Minnesota Timberwolves. What makes it that much different as a member of the Houston Rockets? Not really sure.
Yeah, I mean like the fact that like only two of their guys are shooting even 40% from three. I mean, Katie has been great there, but and Tari Eason has been phenomenal at 48% from three as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
Playing himself into some money.
yeah, no, he's been awesome this year. But
Yeah.
I guess a lot to be decided. Do you want to put him like outside the bubble? I don't think I'm not comfortable with them yet, like putting him in
I'm
the
not
bubble.
comfortable with them yet either. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna put them outside.
Yeah, we're gonna keep him outside. So we still have two teams.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna go through a bit of the teams in the East now. The New York Knicks.
I think they're
Yeah,
firmly.
they're firmly in there. I know they had a rough start a rough start of January, but they really turned it around and they've picked it back up. After that, by the way, shout out to the players only meeting. Jalen Brunson held a players only meeting after a tough loss, and then they've gone on to win 9 of their last 10 games. So shout out to the Knicks.
I think also the Jose Alvarado pickup, it's going to seem like one of those things
Massive.
that's just like an on the margins move, but I think it's actually pretty massive, especially when you think about the fact that Miles McBride could miss real time here over the
Yeah.
next couple of weeks. That's something that I feel like some of the elements that Miles McBride brings to the table, if you're not a Knicks fan, you're not tapped into what he does defensively, what he brings as another ball handler, especially as being able to stretch the floor at the guard position. He
Yeah.
fits really well in that backcourt next to Jalen Brunson. Jose Alvarado, I think, is a lot of that same style of player, but I think it's a little bit more efficient as a 3-point shooter. I think a little bit more tenacious as an on-ball point of attack defender. And TV, this is gonna sound corny, and a lot of people aren't gonna love it, but the New York fans are. As a Brooklyn native, he kind of just is the kind of energy guy that the New York Knicks on a championship kind of run
100%.
need on their roster.
100%.
Yes.
No, 100%. He's point guard Josh Hart. He's point guard Josh Hart.
Facts, yes. I
So,
like that analogy, actually. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
no,
just one of those energizing bunny guys that you just need on a Knicks grit and grind type of roster that has a bunch of dudes who are going to die for loose balls. You know, pick up 94 feet. Not going to be afraid to shoot the 3 ball in big moments. Like, there's a lot of stuff where I think Jose,
yeah,
he's going to make 1 or 2 plays in the postseason that are going to be like the difference between going down. You know, it's going to be the difference between going up 3-1 and being tied 2-2 in a series. Like, it's going to be one of those.
You know, he's the perfect, like, he does all the extra stuff that you need as a point guard. And look, Tyler Kolek has showed like small bits and pieces this year that he could be like a you know, a point guard, like a backup point guard for them in the future. Obviously, they trust Miles McBride a lot more, but like you mentioned, the injuries issues this year with Deuce has been kind of tough. So the fact that they're able to like swing at Jose Alvarado just really shores up that guard position a lot. And I'm not saying that he's the difference of them like us being in the bubble, but they've really shown this year that they are truly like one of the two favorites that are going to be coming out the East. So I think I'm with you. They're fully like in the bubble there, especially like in the weaker Eastern Conference. They have a chance to go all the way.
Yeah.
100%. The team with them though, the Detroit Pistons, Jay. So right now we have the Thunder, Nuggets, and the Knicks in the bubble. Are we including the Pistons?
This might sound crazy. Man, can I? I'm afraid to not use the same logic I used with San Antonio. Everything about the Pistons says like they're there. I'm just want. I gotta see it though. There's a part of me that still needs to see what they look like in a postseason setting. And where does the shot creation outside of Cade Cunningham come in the half court? Still a question mark. Was one of the biggest question marks when they had Jaden Ivey. I think becomes even more of a question mark now after moving
Right.
off of Jaden Ivey,
Yes.
right? Like because they didn't really address that on the trade market. Is Isaiah Stewart gonna make it through the postseason? Seems like
No,
he's
see,
more
see,
set
here's
up.
that's my thing too. He has been one of the most impactful defensive players in the
Yeah,
league this year, and
and
he might miss a lot of time.
yeah. So like, there's that aspect of it as well. I mean, the Pistons as a regular season team with what they're able to do defensively, who Kay Cunningham is, the depth that they do have, guys being able to show up in a real way. Shout out to Jenkins. I think he's been able to make up for a
Extended
lot of.
contract. Yeah,
Yeah,
got
I mean,
there.
yeah, was able to get himself a guaranteed contract. Shout out to him for
Yeah,
being able to make his money. That's a big deal. But similar to the Spurs is one of those where, like, on paper they look right. They feel like a team that should be a problem, but they got some questions where, like, in a postseason setting, again, who is the secondary shot creator next to Cade Cunningham in a half court setting?
yeah.
Is Isaiah Stewart going to be able to play throughout the postseason? Because we don't even know if he's going to be able to start the postseason, let alone make it through the entirety of a playoff run, right? And I mean, outside of that,
I know.
again, youth is a big thing, even on this Pistons team. Even on this Pistons team that has guys like Tobias Harris on the squad, there's a lot of youth on this team.
I'm, I really like this Pistons team, and for my only argument for them being in the bubble, because I do think they're one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. I see more of a path for them getting to the finals, of course, in the Spurs, because especially now loaded West, a lot
Yeah,
of teams
that's
are going to be able to take advantage of that.
yeah.
With the lack of competition out there in the East, I still see a path to them to the championship. Because once you
Mm,
get to the finals, we've seen like when people thought it was going to be, you know, Pacers versus Thunder. We thought it was going to be an absolute wash, and it didn't turn out to be that way.
true,
All they have to do
true.
is get to the dance, and I think
Yeah.
in this East that they're still able to. I feel like if they're in the West, I wouldn't put them in the bubble, but because they're in the East, I'm more willing to do so because I think they're more okay to be like making mistakes in the playoffs, especially in the earlier rounds, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. To kind of prepare them for like when they have to face off against the Knicks in the maybe later rounds, maybe the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I think there's just a bit more room for error, if you know what I mean.
I
In
like that. I like that explanation. I think I'm gonna actually agree with you, and we can put them in the bubble. And I think the fair spot for it, and it's gonna seem unfair, but I think it is there are perks to playing in the East, and this is one of
yes,
them. This is one of them, quite frankly. Home court advantage throughout the entirety of it. Have a very good record against some of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. Know how to handle business. They're back. Their overall identity is built off of being a ferocious defensive team. They
yeah,
have a guy in Cade Cunningham who is a real MVP contender. I believe he's top five in the NBA Kia ladder as well for MVP. Like this is a guy who
yeah,
legitimately has elevated himself
candidate
into
for
that
sure.
conversation. Again, who is their secondary shot creator? Whoever emerges as that guy for them is going to tell me a lot about how far they can go. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for me. But again, like you said in the week Eastern Conference, I mean, we just saw the Pacers do it not once but twice, and this version of the East is probably a lot more open than even both of those runs were, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So,
So do
yeah,
you think we put him? I think we put him in the
I think
bubble.
we put them in. I think we
Yeah,
put them in.
yeah.
You
So
convinced me. I think we have to put them in. Again, shout out to the Eastern Conference for just being so
wide
much
open.
of a crapshoot that,
Yeah.
it gives teams like this a little bit more faith to make a deep run. Because, I mean, you got to play against who's in front of you.
Hmm.
The Pistons, We'll see. They seem like a team that can maybe even do something in the buyout market to maybe shore this thing up. We'll see.
Yeah,
But
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. So right now we got 4 teams in there: Thunder, Nuggets, Knicks, Pistons. The
Okay.
rest of these teams, we can maybe rapid fire through them, and maybe they don't have like as much of a argument as the rest of these guys, but we can maybe like convince ourselves. One of
Uh-huh.
those I have there: the Cleveland Cavaliers.
I think they got to be in. Because if they're not TV, what are they? If the Pistons are and the Cleveland Cavaliers aren't, especially with what we saw at this trade deadline, James Harden, Keon Ellis, and Dennis Schroeder, all three guards, by the way, that address some version of a hole that this Cleveland Cavaliers team is dealing with, whether it's secondary shot creation, facilitation, being able to have guys who can play next to Donovan Mitchell, real point of attack defense, both as a part of the starting unit if you want to start Dennis Schroeder or Keon Ellis next to someone like Donovan Mitchell, or coming off the bench fitting pliably next to someone like James Harden or Donovan Mitchell. Like, there's a lot that got addressed with those two moves. You don't do those investing in what essentially is you telling James Harden you might end up giving him a real contract extension after this as well if you're not legitimately a contender. So I'm going to be honest with you, they kind of have to be in the bubble, because if they're not, what did we just see happen?
They're the only team on this list, I'll say, that made moves that put them into this bubble. They made the moves needed to move into this bubble. And I'm going to put them there too. I think they could be another team there. Again, their last iteration of the team, I'm not putting them in the bubble. Their last iteration with them,
I think I would have been worried as well.
Yeah. We appreciate it, I'm not. But addressing that point guard position, getting someone who plays, who's an All-NBA, all-time great in James Harden, and then addressing the backup needs, basically replacing Lonzo Ball with Dennis Schroeder, who plays and who can play and who has shown that he could be a really good backup point guard in the Eastern Conference. And then, of course, adding Keon Ellis, one of the better point of attack defenders in the league.
Yeah.
They've made the necessary moves to make me confident, saying these Knicks and Pistons teams have not done enough for me to really like solidify themselves that much further in the East. The Cavs have closed the gap. I say they're in.
Yeah, I think another thing, TV, is not a lot of people are going to focus on this because they're so worried about the combination of James Harden next to Donovan Mitchell. But TV, something that I thought was really interesting, and I looked at this a little bit earlier because I had to make sure I wasn't tripping. But one player who's quietly been the biggest winner of the James Harden trade, Jared Allen, has back-to-back 20 and 10 games. He's already got 2 20 and 10 games in the James Harden era. He only had 3 other 20 and 10 games the whole entirety of this season prior to the last 2 games. James Harden has unlocked Jared Allen in a real way, and that's a big deal because Jared Allen's going to be a big part of if this team is going to be able to make a run in the postseason. A lot of people are going to say it's Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley and James Harden being somebody who can kind of be that cherry on top to fill in where Darius Garland once was. But I think Jared Allen, both as a rim defender and a play finisher next to James Harden, quite frankly, in their 2-man game, is going to be so important for this Cleveland Cavaliers team to just get easy offense in the half court. Say what you want about the Eastern Conference being wide open. The Pistons, Knicks, Celtics, Raptors, these are some tenacious defenses you're going to be dealing with. And being able to get some easy baskets, just being able to rely on the 2-man game of James Harden and Jared Allen, I think that's huge. The chemistry they've developed already so far in 2 games has shown itself in a real way. Jared Allen sneakily has been the biggest winner of this James Harden trade. And it's funny to say that because he was actually on the trade block.
Yeah.
Amidst all of this. They were trying to go get Anthony Davis during this trade deadline. But instead, Jared Allen has kind of like revitalized his stance with this Cleveland Cavaliers roster. And I think that's going to do wonders for them once we start talking about playing in a 7-game series.
What is the one thing that James Harden really does elevate? A rim-running athletic center.
Yeah.
He has that in Jared Allen. Man, this month he's been absolutely fantastic, by the way. 40 and 17 in that first game in February. 29 and 10 first game with James Harden. 22 and 13 second game. Bro, he's finally turning it back up. Hopefully the lights aren't too bright for him, but yeah, I think we both have... That's my bad. My bad with the shot. But I think we'll put the Cavs in there because I feel like they close the distance with this with the moves they made. Yeah. Okay, so right now we have the Thunder, the Nuggets, we have the Knicks, Pistons, and Cavs. Shout out to those 3. The freaking East has made things wide open for them over there.
Yeah.
The last 3 teams I'm just gonna quickly go through. 76ers? Can't trust it.
All depends on Embiid, and that's a dangerous gamble. So I'm gonna put
Yeah.
them right on the outside. I think Embiid matters a lot to him. What happens with Paul George in this 25 game suspension is its own question mark. They're the biggest dark horse in the Eastern Conference to me, the Philadelphia 76ers. Because if Joel Embiid can put it together and Paul George kind of start looking like the Paul George we saw right before the suspension,
Yeah.
in a 7 game series, that's a squad to worry about. This
Yeah.
is the type of team that in 82 game season, you
Yeah.
struggle with. But in a 7 game series where you got to win 4 to move on, they've definitely got the talent to sneak up on a couple of these teams in the Eastern Conference, especially if they get a favorable pathway through the postseason. They're
Yeah.
my biggest dark horse of the Eastern Conference playoff, but they're outside the bubble for me right
Yeah.
now because of the question marks they have.
Yeah, no, same for me. As I can't trust this until I see Joel Embiid actually like finish off a playoff series. I just can't.
Facts.
I can't.
Oh, very specifically being able to finish off a playoff series. I think that's a great point, by the way.
I just can't do it. I
Yeah.
as much as I want to believe in this team, as much as I had fun watching this team this season, I just can't do it. They're going to be outside for me. As much as Tyrese Maxey is really like upgrading, like really like raising the floor of this team, I just can't do it. Unfortunately, the last 2 teams, Timberwolves. I mean, they've done it the last couple of years, go to the freaking conference finals.
Look, I'm not betting past the OG killer, man. The OG Slayer is in full effect. He got himself a point guard who can put next to him. TV, if the matchup were right now, based off the standings, they'd be playing the Denver Nuggets. We've seen that movie before, and the Denver Nuggets are a little hobbled.
Right.
Look, man, and the OG Slayer is somebody that I'm just gonna stop messing around with. They're in that picture until they give me a reason to feel otherwise.
You want to put them in the bubble? I'm low key putting them like I'll put them on the edge like with the Denver Nuggets there. I'll put them on the edge with them, but they're in.
I'm gonna put them on the edge, but I think they're in. You got Ant playing at an MVP caliber level. I think that Julius Randle's a good number 2. Still, look, we make our jokes on this podcast about him all the time, but he's quietly had himself a pretty solid season so far. Shout out to Jaden McDaniels. My boy is hooping this season.
Yes.
We talked about Peyton Watson a little bit earlier, having a breakout season this year. Jaden McDaniels has seen the ball go through the hoop from beyond the arc specifically a lot more this season, and it has helped open up his game so much more. He's not necessarily the secondary option that everybody wants him to be over Julius Randle, but dang it, as a third option, man, scoring wise, he has really emerged as a guy they can lean on this year, and it's going to do wonders for them again. As somebody who had himself a couple of really good games, if you look back at that series against the Lakers last year, like Jaden McDaniels had him a couple of games, and I think this postseason he's going to have a couple more.
Yeah. My only thing with the Timberwolves is that their defense is horrible without Rudy Gobert on the floor. I think they're bottom 10 in the league when he's not on the floor, so if they lock in defensively, I'd be more confident in them. I will put them in, but I just need to see more consistency on the defensive end, especially in the non-Rudy Gobert minutes. Because even Jaden McDaniels, who is one of the better wing defenders in the league, even he at times kind of feels like he's like shutting down a little bit when Rudy Gobert is on the floor. And I think that's the blessing and the curse with Rudy Gobert is like you trust him enough that no matter who comes in the paint, that Rudy's gonna be there. But still, like if they're locked in, like especially defensively, all these guys. I'm confident with them, and if they've shown it on like multiple playoffs in a row, there's no reason for me to doubt them here. I'm gonna keep them in the bubble again at the edge. Kind of like I'm not too confident in this team, but especially with the Ayo Dosunmu, I feel like I can put them in the bubble. So I think we're gonna both put them there. And the last team, Jay, you know I have to bring this team up: the Lakers, Luka and LeBron, that and Austin Reeves if he's healthy.
Defensively, I mean, there's every question in the world.
22nd in the league in defensive rating. Yeah, it's they used to have the defense they're going to be able to rely on. Now it's just like offense or bust. There's just no way they're going to be able to compete.
I just worry that if they're going into a series where they got to go like score 130 4 times to win, I don't love that. Their first round matchup is against the Houston Rockets.
Like 130.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, oh man, I gotta put them outside. I feel that feels disrespectful to Luka, but I gotta put them outside, bro. the defensive aspect of it is very dangerous. I think the rim protection aspect with DeAndre Ayton, even offensively with DeAndre Ayton, I just have huge questions about.
Yes.
And again, let's just look at their first round matchup. Like, I trust the Houston Rockets point of attack defenders against Luka, Austin Reeves, and LeBron. Like, I trust that.
I,
And like,
yeah.
that's
They just can't. I mean, the only move they made this deadline is to get Luke Kennard, and I think that's like a solid move, but that's just not moving the needle.
TV. Think about it like this: they addressed an issue on their team, yet it wasn't maybe even one of their top two issues on their team, right? A
Yeah.
real rim protector at the center position and a legitimate floor spacing three were the two main things everybody kept associating with this team. Yes, they were able to address the 3-point shooting aspect of it, especially because they weren't really getting it from Gabe Vincent the way they hoped.
Yeah.
And yeah, you get that from Luke Kennard. Sure, shout out to the Duke Blue Devil connection between him and JJ Redick. Great. But how much did that really move the needle for them? I really wonder. Also, I looked at something earlier today and I had to double check it, but if I'm not mistaken, the Lakers are like 1-8 or something super aggressive against like the top teams in the Western Conference this year. Like
It's
a
something along
lot
those
of
lines. This
their
is horrible. It's a horrible record, I will say.
yeah,
Yeah.
one of their calling cards this season to like being able to survive the year has literally just been the fact that they've been able to beat up on bad basketball teams. Like, that's the calling card for what has them sitting fifth right now, is that they just are beating
What?
up on bad basketball
Which,
teams, and
don't worry.
that's
The Raptors are doing the same thing in the East. Don't
yeah,
worry.
I mean, that's been the saving grace. I think I can pull it up. Yeah, 0-2 versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, 1-2 versus the San Antonio Spurs, and 0-1 versus the Houston Rockets. Like,
Yeah,
th-
no, it's not good. They can't compete with the top teams in the league. That's what truly like happens here. And if you want to make a deep run, you have to always be competitive with them, and they haven't really been this year. I'll put them outside the bubble. I just do not trust. Outside of those three, I don't trust anyone on the team. Truly,
yeah,
I truly don't trust anyone on the team. Even someone who we wanted to trust more, Nuguri Hachimura, has not really been like stepped up to the plate this year either. So
yeah.
if they end up getting like a lesser matchup in the like, say if they do get home court advantage, maybe they get like a lesser matchup, maybe. But I even like find it hard that they might even get out the first round. That's gonna even be a tough task for them.
That's the truth, man. Look, Lakers fans are gonna love it, but I think Lakers fans also know, like, this team, they're they're far from a real contender, in my personal opinion.
There,
Far from a real
yeah,
contender.
for sure, 100%. So officially, after all these teams mentioned, our bubble consists of the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Knicks, Pistons, Cavs, Timberwolves. So we feel like there's 6 teams that truly have a chance at the championship. I feel comfortable with that. I feel kind of comfortable with that.
And
How do you?
it's about the range that you should see it every single year. Don't get me wrong, you're gonna have a surprise team that goes a little bit deeper than you would expect, plays a little bit out of their mind, and has themselves a bit of a run. We've seen it, right? We've seen it a handful of different times just in the last 5 to 6 years. It's part of the reason why the champion keeps changing over the
Yeah,
last 7 years now. At the same time, though, that championship bubble, it's reserved for teams that you feel genuinely comfortable saying they're going to make a deep run. And there's a multitude of things to do. There's a multitude of different factors that have to line into that. Who's your best player? Who's your second best player? Me and you have put a lot of emphasis on the conversation of depth, dating back to really the first year of this inception of the podcast, of like this change of the guard where the big three version of basketball just is not nearly as effective, especially transitioning into this second apron era, right? And then matchups. Again, notice a team like Detroit, we put in the championship bubble for the opposite reasons of everything that made us put the San Antonio Spurs on the edge, all due to just the difference in conference. Like, there's just certain things from even a matchup perspective that tend to dictate that. And I mean, I honestly, even in a more parity filled league, I still feel like you can't go beyond maybe 6 real contenders in a given season, because outside of like your top 6, the rest are kind of like you need a lot of things to go right.
go your way, that sort of thing, right? So, 100%, I get it from that perspective, 100%. So we have our 6 teams. If you agree, disagree, let us know down below. Maybe some people might have it smaller, some people might have it bigger. So we want to hear what you have to say about our championship bubble that we have right now. We might come back to this maybe in another like next month or something to see if anything that we feel changes. But as of right now, we have our 6 teams. Maybe it'll change throughout the season. It'll be exciting to see what these teams end up doing. Maybe some of them prove us wrong. We'll have to wait and see. But Jay, we're about to close out the episode. But before we go, we have to end it off. It is the week of Valentine's Day. By the time this episode comes out, I believe you're going to be 2 days away from Valentine's Day. And Jay has a lovely poem he would like to share as a punishment for losing the month of December and January of the Daily May Picks Challenge. So, Jay, we want to hear your love letter to the NBA or a certain NBA team. Let's see what you got over here.
Okay, so I wrote this from the perspective of a Toronto Raptors fan. I did some research on the Toronto area, and I made sure that don't get it twisted, y'all. I did use ChatGPT to help me write this, but at the same time, I did my own research. I gave it a couple of interesting things that I thought would be kind of funny to crack jokes on as well, and a couple of different things to hopefully make this a little interesting. So this is written from the perspective of a Raptors fan, and hopefully some of the research of some of the things that I found, whether it's landmarks or different players and things of that nature, will kind of like bring this whole thing together.
No, he never told me this, and I'm going into this blind, so let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, man. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna sit here and act like I put insane amount of work into this, but at the same time, if I'm gonna take a daily picks challenge punishment, gotta at least take it seriously. I mean, I spent half an episode with a Batman head helmet on, so I mean, I'm gonna commit to the bit. All right, let's oh man, this is so corny though, dude. I'm not gonna lie. All right. So here is my Valentine's Day themed or Toronto Raptors Valentine's Day themed poem. A little long. Here we go. It says, roses are red, the CN Tower is tall. I gave my heart to the Toronto Raptors, emotional damage and all. They ghosted the lottery, slid into playoff DMs, 32-22, got me acting unwise in my Tims. Y'all know it's a little chilly over there in Toronto these days. You're my toxic Valentine, my northern affair. I swear every February I tell myself this year we're different while stressing eating poutine on the stairs. It starts with Scotty Barnes, big heart, big boards, big vibes, grabbing rebounds like rent is due, stealing souls and possessions alike. Then Brandon Ingram, pull up smooth, mid-range silk, all-star glow. A late replacement gift after Steph Curry said, nah fam, my ankles said no. Shout out Emmanuel quickly dishing dimes like a Valentine waiter. RJ Barrett crashing the rim like he owes it money later. Jakob setting screens built like IKEA furniture. And Grady Dick letting it fly. Yeah, Dick stays splashing with purpose. Pause. Dear Toronto, you love rough, but you love honest. You still remember when Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson fell and the Golden State Warriors accidentally mailed us a championship belt? We've been heartbroken before. Kyle Lowry tears, DeMar DeRozan loyalty, and yeah, folks, swear nobody wants to stay here. Just ask Tracy McGrady about loyalty. But now Barnes and Ingram got matching all-star wristbands, and suddenly Canada is feeling sexy again with playoff plans. So here's my Valentine's card. A little drunk, not gonna lie, kind of a crazy write-up, but we're fully committed to the bit here. Fully committed. You're 5th in the East, 3rd in the Atlantic, and I'm emotionally invested. You're not perfect, you fight, you brick, you stress me out nightly, but I still ride for you harder than couples who post my person on IG politely. Raptors, you're my situationship, my winter fling, my abusive crush, but every February I come back like, baby, just one more fast break, just one more Scotty Barnes dunk flush. Happy Valentine's Day to Toronto Raptors.
Beautiful, beautifully said, beautifully done. And yes, Jay had to write a love letter to the Toronto Raptors as a
Man,
daily NBA picks
I hope
challenge.
some of y'all got those references out there. My Toronto natives. There were a couple of pools in there. Poutine, poutine felt like a pool. That
Have
felt
you
like a
tried
pool.
poutine before, by the way?
I mean, it's just fries, right?
It's fries and gravy
I
and like
mean, it
cheese.
doesn't look great. It doesn't look great,
Hey,
but
hey,
I'm
look.
sure it's good. I don't know.
Shout out,
It
by the
didn't
way.
look.
It is pretty good. Depending on the place, but yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, thank you, Jay, for giving us such a nice little send off into Valentine's Day. And yes, we just the end of today's episode. Thank you guys for watching. Jay, after after those beautiful words said to the Toronto Raptors, what do you have to tell these beautiful people before we sign out?
Man, I'm a man of my word, guys. Don't say I never put effort into these challenges, man. At the end of the day, the NBA Daily Picks Challenge, we try our best to be as consistent about it as humanly possible. It's one of the more fun aspects of the NBA season, just being able to lock in every single night. And sure, there's other things that we, of course, should be, talking about and locking into. You can definitely expect around the postseason. Me and TV have a tradition of covering every single game from every single series when the playoffs start. So there's more than a ton of content that's going to be on the way, paired with stuff like the NBA Daily Picks Challenge, of course, right? But I mean, we're down to the dog days now, man. NBA All Star break is at the end of this. It starts, I believe, at the end of this week,
Yes,
right?
on Friday. Yeah, it does.
So it's going to be a quiet little stretch of basketball, and then the tanktastic couple of months starts. So just
Teams
buckle
already
in.
started, bro.
Yeah,
Teams have
we're going to have
already
to be
started.
a lot more creative and make things a little bit more interesting, even than what we've already done with stuff like this, for example. But I think you guys can trust that we're going to be able to do that because we've had quite a couple of years of being able to put some interesting stuff together. And believe it or not, me and TV kind of grow into our prime around late February, early March. This is when the creative juices start to really flow.
100%. But yeah, that's the. But yeah, thank you for getting guys for watching. Like Jay mentioned, we have a lot of stuff still planned on for you. People will call these the dog days of the NBA season, especially with March Madness coming around and all that. But trust me, we're gonna be still locked into the NBA season. Hopefully, WNBA starts up like pretty soon too. I know they're still going through the CBA talks and everything like that. So hopefully
Yeah.
does get resolved. But of course, still pay the players, of course. But it's definitely gonna be a great time here in the NBA still. You're gonna be able to lock in with us at the Hate Your Fetus podcast. Remember to check us out on all of the social media platforms. All of those can be found down below, as well as our individual social medias as well. And yeah, it's been an awesome episode. Thank you guys for watching. Remember, we're gonna be back here next week with a new episode, so be sure to tap in for that. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you all have a fantastic day. This is TV. This is Jay. We're signing out. Peace.